Okay. Okay, welcome back. I'm Dan Sui. I had the great pleasure to help chairing this panel discussion with our geospatial leaders panel. We have a very distinguished panel with diverse background. So before we start some of the discussion questions, I would like to ask our panelists to do a quick introduction. I'll start myself. I'm Dan Sui. I'm currently a professor of geography and also international and public affairs at Virginia Tech.
Oh, hello, I'm Susan Paddock. I'm Executive Vice President and Chief Statistician at NORC at the University of Chicago, which is an independent research organization focused on public opinion and social science research.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Siva Ravada. I'm a Vice President of Development in Oracle Corporation. I'm mainly responsible for all of the spatial-related activities at Oracle.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Barb Ryan, and I'm currently the Executive Director of the World Geospatial Industry Council. It's a not-for-profit trade association working on behalf of commercial companies, which Oracle is a member, that are working in the geospatial and Earth observation domains. Thanks.
I'm Charlie Catlett. I'm a senior computer scientist at Argonne National Laboratory, which is a Department of Energy science lab. And I'm part of the Mansueto Institute for Urban Innovation at the University of Chicago.
Hello, my name is George Percivall. I'm with my consulting firm's GeoRoundtable. I work with the Spatial Web Foundation and the IEEE, Institute for Electronical Engineers, where I'm a co-chair of several standards organizations. Previously, I was a CTO of OGC, and I used to work at NASA on some remote sensing projects.
Good afternoon. I'm Richard Butgereit. I'm the Chief Information Officer with the Sanborn Map Company, and living in Tallahassee, Florida.
Okay. That's great. Thank you, panel. So here are the questions given to us. I guess the expectation is we expect all the panelists to make some powerful points without using PowerPoints. I know that could be challenging, but I'm sure you guys can do it. So in no particular order, of course, I will try to make this as dynamic, as spontaneous as possible. So feel free to jump in by the audience if you have any comments and questions. So I would like the panelists to address any of these questions that you feel comfortable with, and then we will invite the audience to share their thoughts. So you would like to go start?
So I just want to start and say how impressed I've been with the things that are happening here in a couple of different ways. So one is typically in NSF projects, you do some research, and then kind of on the side, you do some education stuff because they tell you you're supposed to do that. And I saw such a strong emphasis in just today in particular on the engagement of students in summer schools and curriculum development. Like I'm starting to click on the site and want to do some of those tutorials myself. So I was really impressed with that. The other question, sort of a question I had coming in was, how has the project embraced or factored in the generative AI revolution that we've seen in the last year? And I also felt that the project has done a really good job of figuring out how to weave these new capabilities appropriately into the curriculum. So I'm going to say, usually these panels are you get a little information once a year or so, and you get a presentation and you go, oh, that's interesting. But I'm really excited about what's happening with iGuide, and so well done, everyone.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. I think throughout today's presentations and also yesterday's tutorials, I think it truly reflects the spirit of convergence as defined by NSF, in terms of transdisciplinary, deep intellectual linkage on the one hand, but also stakeholder synergy involving not just the folks from academia, but also from government agencies, national labs, and also industry leaders. I know the industry are very well represented here. So these are the two sort of dual dimensions that NSF is expecting for all convergence projects.
So I guess I can start. By default, Oracle is the biggest private sector company here, so maybe I should talk about some of the professional development things that we do in my team. So as Colin was talking about before, one of the biggest problems for us in the industry is you rarely find students who are both computer science and geography together, right? So you either find computer science students or you find geography students. So for me, when I did my PhD, I was a computer science student, but luckily I was lucky enough to work on a high-performance spatial computing problem. So when I got into the industry, I kind of had some spatial background and a lot more computer science background. So that shaped a lot of the thinking and then development that happened to me over the years. So like within the second week of my work, my manager told me, this so-and-so customer in Florida is having a problem, and this is the problem, solve it. So that sense of trying to solve some real problem that's happening in the real world, that gave me a real purpose for me at least to try to understand the problem and try to come up with a solution for it. So that's what I realized over the time when I started managing other people, giving them the sense of if it is a computer science student that comes in, a lot of the times they're very good at algorithms and stuff like that, but they don't really understand what the problem is from the spatial domain. So if it's a computer science student, then it's very important to make them understand what the real problem that they're trying to solve. And if it is a geography student that is coming in, then they understand the problem, they don't have the skills necessary to solve the problem. So that the development in that sense is make them understand importance of algorithms and importance of computer science basics so that they can apply those skills to solve the problem. But overall, all of these things, the main thing is to make them understand that they are working on a real-world problem, right? Not just some random abstract problem that they're trying to solve. So they can understand this is the problem they're trying to solve, and this is how the end user or the customer is going to use that solution that they're building. So that gives them a lot of a sense of ownership and pride in what they're doing. Right, so again, as Colin was saying before, right, if you're a computer science student, people say you can do anything, right? But this way, upfront, you're telling them what you're doing today is going to impact this particular set of customers, this particular group of people, and that's how it's going to make some change in the world. So that sense of ownership and the pride really takes a long way in owning what they're doing and then feeling proud about it. And then that really helps them develop in their career.
I could address some of at least one of the questions up there. I was just thinking about following up on your point about really diving into real problems and such. And I think there's a question up there about what has happened that's been positive in the past 5 years. And I think like this program is an example of this, of really emphasizing this convergence approach, or in the health area, in the medical area, they call it transdisciplinarity, and just the emphasis on training and educating students to work on multidisciplinary teams and to work across those disciplinary barriers. I received my PhD in statistics 24 years ago, and I've seen a huge change in my disciplinary field in terms of the seriousness with which statisticians are approaching real, problems and engaging in deep collaborations. And I am sure my field is not the only technical field that has sort of undergone this revolution. I think in part thanks to data science. And so I would say, it connected to career development as well, is learning, how to work in this way and taking those risks of saying, I don't know what, this, I think someone referred to not knowing something about economics as a geographer. I don't know economics. Like taking that risk and learning something about economics is just so valuable because we have to do this throughout our careers. And the more you do that, the more people really are going to want to work with you. And so I guess that was just the thing that came to mind when, seeing that question about what, is positive, in particular in the past 5 years.
So the following up on the multidisciplinary and the question about generative AI and the one on there that mentions AI and the like, we know that we receive more information than, ever before through the channels that we get information, and how to discern signal from noise because of all that information is a challenge. It's been that way, for many years now. We seem to have this wonderful, shiny solution that allows a large language model to give us a summary of all the information of the world in response to one query. It's a wonderful thing. You can ask it a question and it'll tell you really convincingly that you have this set of information. So in some sense, you become a multidisciplinary expert by asking ChatGPT to explain geography to me, for example. And maybe not. So what I see with the use of ChatGPT and folks that are looking across diverse questions and the like is that some of them stop. They say, okay, it's given me an answer. I can recite, I can talk, it sounds good. Others begin probing that. They say, okay, where are the facts in this response? How can I confirm those facts? How can I go to original resources to determine if that's fact? What is my training in critical thinking that allows me to discern what's given in there to say if it's even true based on its own perspective? So, we see, if I want to make a parallel then to iGuide, multidisciplinary, I didn't know everything that was presented here, but it really challenges me in watching the presentations to say, how can I apply my critical thinking skills? How can I pursue those references and think about it? And that's key to the multidisciplinary and also the professional development and lifelong learning thing as well. So I think we're going to learn a lot. We're going to be doing a lot with generative AI. We don't know all the things that it's going to come about, but that's one of them.
Thank you, George. Anybody else? Any comments, questions from the audience?
Yeah, I'll just jump in and maybe weave a couple of those thoughts together, both on kind of the professional development side and the knowledge transfer side. Maybe building up first on Siva's comment. Actually, Siva chairs a committee that we have in WGIC called an Industry Academic Collaboration Committee, because what we often hear from academia is that, geez, there either maybe aren't kind of the jobs out there that we need, or we hear from industry that academia isn't necessarily producing the kids that they need to have these jobs, so there's maybe a little bit of a disconnect. So one of the things that this committee is doing is putting together a list of internships that exist across all of our 45 member companies. And what I think is interesting, and I think this kind of maybe supplements what Siva said, it certainly doesn't replace it, is that these internship opportunities give students an opportunity to kind of come in and, one, see the culture of a particular organization, which is really important. Is there passion there for what they're doing? And then from an industry side, I think a lot of, do you need some basic academic level and training? Absolutely. Well, let's not downplay that at all. But a lot of hiring, maybe more hiring than you think, takes place on kind of the softer skills. How well can you work in a team? Are you excited about what you're doing? Do the values align? And then I guess maybe going back to your comment, how you kicked this session off, is a lot of the presentations today, particularly out of your summer school efforts, it looked like you had fun. And work has to be fun. And so think about that too, because I do think employers do a lot of hiring on, are you going to enjoy what you're doing? Of course, you've got to have some level of technical expertise, but don't undermine or sell short the soft skills about working in an institution or an organization. And honestly, I don't think it matters if it's public, private, not-for-profit. Those are skills that transcend all those organizations.
Great, thank you, Barbara.
I guess I got to say something, right? No, but just to follow up sort of directly on that, John Koppel, our CEO, reminds us every once in a while that what we're doing is kind of cool, and you should be enthused about it. And I saw a lot of that here. I mean, things so technically grounded and blowing my mind on the things I learned and sat in yesterday in some of the tutorials. Thank y'all for letting me lurk around and learn and soak in all these great platforms and the great things you're working on. But yeah, just then to see not only that technical grounding, but then to see the enthusiasm and the fun that people are having around it. And I think that's, what iGuide's about.
Can you come?
Hey, thanks. So my question is, how do all of you see the various barriers and facilitations of doing convergent science in your different roles? Because we've got people from diverse roles here. We've got national lab, we've got industry, we've got more academic contexts, and it sounds like you want students who can do convergent science. And so as some of the younger early career people who are getting that training, I'm curious where I'm going to be best able to do it.
Excellent question. I think I will give it the first crack first, because last month, the famous biographer, writer, Walter Isaacson published Elon Musk's biography, which has been talk of among many circles. Of course, among the higher education administrators, the question has been, what exactly we in higher ed should do to truly promote innovation and creative activities? Because the broader context is, I think mainstream media, Micah, you can remind me, is it the New York Times, has been dubbed higher education in the United States is the second most conservative industry. In case you are curious, we are second to what? We are second to classic opera. So what New York Times editorial was teasing us about is that they are saying that you folks in academia, they are proposing all those progressive agenda for society, but when changes come to yourself, you guys don't change anything. You are very good at talking to any issues to death through your big committees. So, but I do think, having been involved in administration during the past 15 years or so, I do believe they have a very good, valid point. So in terms of what we teach, how we teach it, how do we create the environment that truly stimulate, innovative, creative activities, I do think we have a lot work to do, especially in the context of all this explosive, disruptive development of generative AI. So I will stop there. I would like our panel jump in to share your thoughts.
I can start to address your question about how it works in my environment and in similar organizations. So in my research organization, we have a core research science area, which is the area I'm responsible for, where we have the statisticians and survey methodologists and most of the data scientists, and then we have departments that are focused on particular portfolios. They're substantively driven, like education, health, et cetera. And so, we in this research science core work across all the departments, and, we do it in a way where we can, have sort of our, we're a resource and, for the organization, as well as having our own research agendas as well to further the capabilities of the organization through, trainings and strategic projects and other initiatives. And it is a balance because there are other groups like located in these other departments that have become resources for the entire organization. And so there's been a balance of having departments that are like devoted to, going out and finding projects and having relationships with the clients and kind of being on the business side, if you will, versus having the flexibility where people who are in those departments who have capabilities that cut across the organization can work across the organization. And so it requires, really good communication and collegiality and, a commitment to that type of work. And so, certainly when you're, going out in the job market in the future, if you're looking at, private organizations and I can't speak to how it applies in a university setting, but certainly asking questions about like where people sort of, sit in terms of departments and how much interaction there is and how do people become involved with projects and all of that. Those are really, really important questions.
So I can add my perspective from a private sector. So typically when you look at the job industry, broadly there are two types of categories for the jobs. One is the product development. So companies like Oracle, ESRI, you develop a product, right? So, and the other types is the consulting type of projects. So consulting projects, you work on a project for 6 months, 1 year, then you move on to a different project. So I've known people from both the industries. I myself work on a product development. Then product development, you will develop deep understanding of different technologies. And then within my organization, we have teams that work on JSON, teams that work on text, teams that work on AI. And we have to make all of those things work together with the spatial, right? So we collaboratively work with all of these different things. But I'm still the expert in spatial, but I talk to other people, I educate them about spatial, they educate me about JSON, or they educate me about text and other things. So that way I'm growing my knowledge and then being useful, right? But if you go to a consulting type of project, there you're learning a lot more different types of skills because one day you might be working on a project on some JavaScript. Next project you might be using React, right? So that way it depends on what you want to really achieve in your career, right? So if you want to learn a lot of these different technologies and always be up to date with the latest technology, that is the whatever is like the flavor of the month, then you might be better off doing in a consulting and not that type of project. But if you want to build something and then have some sense of pride about what you're doing, and then also track what people are using with the products that you're building, then that's where the product development type of teams work, right? So again, in all of these scenarios, collaboration is always happens, but in some situations, collaboration is a long-term collaboration, and in some situations, it's a very short-term collaboration. So depends on your personality, right? Whatever works for you. But that is something fundamentally people need to understand. There is a big difference between those two types of careers.
I want to kind of add on your comment, Barb, about people having fun. I think a good convergence research project has to have some elements to it, one of which is a problem that's really interesting to the people who are involved. If you're not interested in the problem or the challenge, then it doesn't matter what the environment is. You're just going to be bored. You're not going to. So one is an interesting challenge or problem. I think the other is it's hard to quantify the culture of the group, how they interact with one another. Are they having fun? And I've seen many examples where, and this doesn't happen at the institutional level. So there are places, I work at Argonne National Laboratory, and the part of the laboratory I work in is very collaborative, and we're working on fun projects together. They're multidisciplinary. Other parts of Argonne I wouldn't enjoy working at because they don't have that culture. So it's not, you know, I can't say, go work in a national laboratory. Come work with me. It's the culture of the people, and where you have people who are working on something they're interested in, who enjoy working together, you will get convergence research. And if you just start with an abstract, let's do convergence research over here, it's not a guarantee that you'll end up with a fun and interesting project with a group that you really want to spend time with and work with.
The story we saw today from Eric about learner pathways, was that the word? Yay. So generalists, and then going deep on a particular technology, then the pi model, which is 2, and then the U model. It's beyond me right now, but that reminded me a lot of what has been useful in projects where it's been multidisciplinary that I've been involved with. If I was to say anything, I'm a system engineer. I'm a generalist in engineering, and I need to have a depth in particular topics in order to do that. And so it matches well with this, I guess, the T model version of that learner pathways. And that's really key. There's some other metaphors of that too. The one about the fox and the hedgehog. This is from a few years ago, and that was actually a little bit derogatory. The fox is the hedgehog is the person who thinks that one idea is all that you need to organize the entire world. And the fox understands that you need a little bit of a whole bunch of ideas in order to put things together to have a solution. And so this debate about whether you're a fox or a hedgehog, and it's culture, but it's also people going back and forth over time in terms of at times you need that general perspective to be able to bring in convergence and another wonderful word, consilience. E.O. Wilson's a really good word about that. And at times you need to dive deep. You need to be able to do the very technical. You need to be able to, understand the math. You need to be able to do the detailed code. Whatever it is, you need to have that capability as well. And I think all of those attributes come into play in a convergence, multidisciplinary environment such as we have here in iGuide, for example, I think.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention the models as well, because I thought maybe the answer to your question was in Eric's presentation about the T or the pi or the ultimate U model or whatever it was. And for me, it's kind of, where do you feel comfortable? Do you see yourself in one of those places? And then I guess the only thing that I might say, and it might weave George's comments in with Shiva's a little bit, I'm not sure you as a person have to have it all, but if there's an openness there, if you recognize you're in this T model solidly, but if you know for certain tasks you got to be over there with you, or pi, then for me, I think that's good enough. So it's almost knowing your own strengths and weaknesses. And then the only thing else I would say is it's hard. I worked at the U.S. Geological Survey for 34 years. In fact, I loved the presentations today where USGS data was presented, and all I could think of, I hope you're going back and actually showing some USGS people what you're doing with their data. That's for all the presenters that referenced the USGS today. But we had 4 divisions: geology, the name, water, the one I grew up in, mapping, led it near the end, and then biology. And oh my goodness, they were as siloed as can be. And back in the 90s, mid-90s, we really said we're stronger as an institution looking at, we didn't call it convergence thinking, but that's clearly what we needed, a systems approach to all of this. The organization is still dealing, no matter what organizational structures we've done to accommodate, more convergence thinking. If you don't want to work together, you're not going to work together. And so there's a big part of culture in these institutions too. And so for me, being open, and I think you said this, Shiva, being open to different perspectives is just so important.
The only thing I want to add is I think one of the challenges for convergence research on most of the university campuses is the funding opportunity, especially at the federal level, especially those major funding opportunity to address all the major challenges facing humanity. They all require transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary collaboration under the general umbrella convergence. And yet, if you look at all the how disciplined most of the campuses are organized, they're still organized based on the traditional department and the college boundaries. So I think the current tenure and promotion system on most of the university campuses are still a major barrier. So while I was at NSF, we funded a project I think is still ongoing. It's a PATI Coalition. It's an acronym for Promotion Tenure for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. It's a national organization. They are trying to address precisely this issue. How do we evaluate interdisciplinary, innovative, and entrepreneurial activities so that those faculty members doing this line of work can get a reasonable shot getting promoted and rewarded, recognized in a timely manner? Because that's what our junior faculty are telling me whenever I try to sell them. They need to think convergently, think about those transdisciplinary project. The first thing they told me, gosh, I need to get a tenure and promoted first. My department are telling me I can only publish in those 7 journals if I want to get tenured in this department. I know it varies from college to college, from department to college, but I think that's still a major barrier.
I really liked Eric's spaghetti slides about convergence because, among other things, because you added a sort of dynamic element to it, that it was over time and people come together at a particular time when there's a particular challenge to go after, and maybe later they go in different ways. We developed a curriculum at Lane Tech High School in Chicago for students to learn about wireless sensors and how to do science with measurements and how to build sensors. And the first year that we did it, there was a prerequisite that you had to have taken the Java programming course. And for a number of reasons, including the fact that hardly any girls signed up, we took that requirement away. And very quickly what we found was that, so teams of 3, we had the students in teams of 3 building and doing their experiments. We found that students were able to come together, and one might be somebody who's interested in environmental sciences but uninterested in programming or electronics. And they could be on a team with somebody who loves programming electronics but isn't that interested in environmental research. And so we found that the program was much more successful when we made room for these convergent teams. And I thought your diagram about convergence was great, and the way the curriculum was presented had that sort of feel to it from my point of view.
Mike?
This is a question very much directed to the Council of Geospatial Leaders. The word geospatial doesn't occur anywhere in the questions. It does occur actually in the bottom right-hand corner in very small print as a decoding of iGuide. So my question is, has geospatial now become mainstream? Or does geospatial give a special flavor to the question of convergence research and education?
By the way, we did not come up with the question, so the organizer, yeah, but Mike, to answer your question, here's the interesting I noticed, that the leaders on my campus are doing geospatial stuff are all computer science folks, that they have 0 geospatial training. And yet we do have those domain specific disciplines doing the traditional geospatial stuff, but they are not the leaders on our campus. That's the interesting thing I noticed. I don't know whether that's somehow a reflection of the question that you posed. I know that's not a unique, that's maybe unique to Virginia Tech, but I do think it's a reflection of an interesting trend.
So the largest company in the world, 6 months ago at their developer conference, closed their conference with a 30-minute presentation on a device they labeled as spatial computing. It was the Apple View, I forget the name of it, right? ProView or something like that. So mainstream, couldn't get much more mainstream than that announcement. Is that a spatial that is in that letters there in the lower right? There's certainly an overlap, but what do we mean by spatial, I think, has become such a large topic. So it has become mainstream, but it's become something different?
Yeah, and it's a great question. So if you think about geospatial, awareness has become mainstream. So Google Maps made it ubiquitous that everybody now knows about maps. But also at the same time, it does a disservice that you cannot believe how many conversations I had with people when I tell them that I do spatial computing at Oracle. And first question is, doesn't Google Maps already do that? Why do you still have a job? Right? So again, the awareness has increased, but at the same time also people think that that's what it is. People think that showing maps on a phone is what spatial computing is all about, right? But we know it's not true. And even in the industry, also even today, I have a lot of conversations with people when they do analytics. They do a lot of analytics, and then in the end, they show a spatial map, and they say, see, I use spatial in my analytics, right? But that's, again, we know that is not really spatial analytics, because if you go down the stack, they don't talk about spatial proximity, spatial computing anywhere else in the stack. When it comes to the visualization, they pull something and then put a map and say, I did spatial, right? So again, awareness is there, and unfortunately, a lot of people think that putting the results on a map is spatial computing, which is very bad for our industry. But again, that's where we need to still educate people that spatial computing is more than a beautiful map. It is beautiful map is the beginning. It's good that at least people are putting stuff on the map, but there is a lot more that goes behind the covers in spatial computing, and that understanding is not really there in the industry, and we need to educate people on that.
When I introduced myself, that I work for the Sanborn Map Company, which has been around since 1866, starting about 10 miles over that way in Pelham, making the fire insurance maps, which are now a historic map product of much importance. We're actually renaming ourselves as Sanborn Geospatial. And so when you see those kinds of changes in the names of companies that have been around that long, it does make you wonder. And we see many other of the private sector companies doing the same thing. NV5 is now NV5 Geospatial. There's several others, and that's just a trend. So I do think it is people gathering around that and making it more mainstream. But through all of the years I've been working in this profession, I just put on the hat that that works for you best at that moment. When you have when you have geospatial data and you need more space on the server, it's just data. You need to accommodate me. When I want my special server, I put on my GIS hat, and no, it's special GIS that I'm doing. I can't be over there with the email and the other systems. So, even as it becomes more mainstream, make sure to put on the hat you need to accomplish the thing you need.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. What you're going to see tomorrow on a slide that I'll show is because we are going through an entire rebranding effort, and the tagline was geospatial in everything, geospatial for everyone. So I'm thinking, wow, this sings to us. So I would absolutely say it's pervasive, it's there. Yeah, we have come of age. Nobody knows it. Nobody outside our room knows it. And then I have to say, is it important that they know it? Because it's always in service of something. It's in service of agriculture or flooding or all the applications that we've heard today. And so I was involved actually here in New York in August. There was a conversation among a group of geospatial folks wanting to rebrand the metaverse to the geoverse because of us, because of geospatial data. And a person came in, Ed Parsons, you probably know him, right, from Google, and Ed's a character anyway. But Ed goes, he goes, when I was younger, I wouldn't say anything. It doesn't sound quite right, but I wouldn't say anything. But he goes, I'm of an age now that if it doesn't sound right, I'm just going to speak out. And so he said, stop. We have a metaverse. It's a virtual representation of the universe that we don't need to rebrand it the geoverse to make ourselves special and think that we're important, because it actually erodes the story that it's pervasive and underpins everything. Agriculture, flooding. So for me, there's kind of two ends to that question. I think we've come, but the fact that nobody knows geospatial, my mother does, well, my mother's not here with us anymore, but my brother, still says, now what do you do? And maybe we need to get off that messaging a little bit and just speak to it as an enabler of protecting people, protecting lives, delivering the Sustainable Development Goals. Probably not a popular message for a geospatial crowd, but we've got challenges communicating that. And at what point do we just say, let's not spend more time on the semantics of it, let's just get on with making sure it's pervasive and touching everybody every day.
Yeah, Barb, that's great. That reminds me, my first meeting with the Virginia Tech Sagani Center for AI and the Data Analytics research team, because I noticed that they are doing lots of the mainstream geospatial stuff, for like a political redistricting, floodplain mapping and stuff. But they are all computer scientists, not a single geographer in that team. But when I told them I'm a geographer by training, I've been working on GI science, geospatial stuff, and I meant to be very serious. I said, I really believe spatial is special. You know what? The response I got is they told me, Dan, you have such a good sense of humor. They laughed at the idea when I try to tell them spatial is special. So to them, it's all, big part of the big data analytics. So,
Well, I do think that spatial thinking is now very pervasive, and I've seen reference to like spatial analyses of dental health and of genomics, and so it's really rooted, I guess, in scientific thinking now.
anybody else from the audience?
Yeah, I think so. Well, first of all, thanks so much for you all being here, and I think it's quite a privilege to have this group of incredible leaders with us as we are essentially sorting out our roadmap going forward. This is the first forum we have launched, and within the NSF funding, there will be at least 3 more. And I'm wondering whether you could offer any advice, essentially related to the question Mike was posing. Going forward, how do we grow this community? It will be bigger next year because this is the first time we're doing this, right? To open up what iGuide does to a little bit broader community, but it's still within very considerably careful steps because we don't want to open this too fast. So if you could offer your advice, suggestions as we go for our next steps, because this essentially is to demonstrate how geospatial and convergence are married in a way that is enabling solutions to societal challenges. So yeah, any maybe suggestions, advice as to, hey, you got to do this, one more step, or don't do that, based on your insights and professional experiences. That would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Okay. Now that you asked me, I do have something that all the universities would do, because I come from a computer science background, so I'm going to speak with computer science bias. So if you look at all of the universities today, there are very few universities that offer spatial computing or spatial-oriented classes from computer science departments. Right? I know maybe like 3 or 4 universities I know, they do masters from computer science departments, but do geospatial computing type of masters or undergraduate programs. So if more universities provide those kind of programs, that will be of great service to the industry, because again, all of this industry, even though they're all geospatial industry, primary work is computer science and algorithms and those kind of things, right? So those are the skills that we need, with also a background on geospatial and spatial computing and those type of technologies. So if universities offer more of those things from computer science departments, but have more geospatial-oriented courses or master's programs and things like that, that will be really useful for us.
For years as well, I worked with the Florida Division of Emergency Management and their state emergency response team. And I think that's where I've seen the most multidisciplinary groups brought together, the most convergence. We saw, many of the talks presented over the last couple of days, exploring disasters and emergency preparedness, response, and resiliency. And unfortunately, that's just, going to get more and more important. So continue to partner and explore those worlds. Work with emergency managers, help them understand their issues. Help, we're really all chasing resiliency. If we don't have that, how are we going to still be here? Because the climate is just going to get worse and worse, more challenging, let's just say, okay? So that was just my advice, is go back and try to work more with emergency managers.
Yeah, one idea I would like to put on the radar this group, Shawn, you heard about this me talking about this during the UCGS summer meeting 3 months ago. So I think moving forward in terms of geospatial research, I think we needed to pay more attention to the emerging quantum computing in this at 3 different levels, both as the platform in terms of the data handling, the technical aspect, and also as a methodological framework, because quantum thinking is essentially more holistic thinking, especially when you are thinking about linking across multiple domains. And to me, more importantly, I think it's also at the conceptual representational level. Especially if you're thinking about linking some of the geoethics, linking the human subjectivity with some of what's going on in the more sort of objective world, because quantum thinking at a very fundamental level is to linking the observer with the observed. So in that sense, I do believe that the quantum thinking, the emerging quantum paradigm has a lot to offer for the geospatial world. I understand that it may be still, in terms of real practical applications, still 5 to 10 years away, but I think it's probably about time to position ourselves to move toward that direction.
I think there's probably a couple of directions that are interesting, and when we think about how does geospatial influence ongoing developments, one is on this side of the metaverse, which is also that spatial computing thing, and I participated in the Metaverse Standards Forum. And there's a whole lot of, let's create this visualization of stuff. And then you start talking about, let's bring in stuff that actually has a real location. Well, I don't know, it's over there, X, Y, it's X, Y, Z. There's no datum. There's no real location associated with this. So trying to integrate measurements from somewhere into a metaverse with real live stuff, the augmented reality end of metaverse, they have not solved, and they need the technologies of geospatial in order to do that. We see that similar kind of thing in robotics where, the robot can move around the room, but where is the room? The room's in a factory, the factory's in a city, the city's in, and that expansion of coordinate reference systems beyond the local one that is involved with that particular robot or metaverse is a problem that isn't widely solved. And we've done it, right? We've done that in GIS systems. We can integrate data from many locations and put it together and put layers together and get it accurately fused and integrated. That's, the key geographic step. So that technology of being able to integrate data with a geographic, geospatial, coordinate reference systems kind of mindset is something that can influence these broader communities that are now spatial computing. The other side of it, and you'll love this one, is when we're out looking at sensors and actuators in the world. So now we've got, the ability to integrate the real world by looking at, a web of sensors, a web of things, and bring those into these worlds. And what does that mean in a real-time sense for the way that we integrate and solve problems like emergencies? How do we trust that data, that it's actually, I just found this sensor on the web, should I believe it? If it's in Chicago, I would. But that side of it, the geographic side of real-time data measurement and use of that data to solve real-world problems, I think is another area that, that iGuide could do well with. So, did I set you up well enough? Maybe people don't know.
Well, I don't know what you're expecting me to follow with, but I was thinking as I was listening today and also kind of thinking on the way here and knowing I was coming here about some of the needs that we have in science for building large AI models. So we're trying to build these huge models. Microsoft just announced one. Allen AI Institute has done a large model. And what is one of the key requirements there is training data, and really good high-quality training data. And I think that as you're working on projects in iGuide where you're developing and processing data, I think if you keep in mind that this might also possibly be contributed to people building models as training data, that would be a good sort of product of iGuide in terms of both the science and also raising visibility.
I guess I'd come back and just reinforce something Richard said about users at the table. It might, your applications are so diverse. We've heard so much today that it might be hard to do it up at your management level or leadership level. But if there were a request of all the research that's being funded to make sure there's a user at the table, or somehow you're benchmarking those results. So whether it was flooding in the Tennessee Valley Authority, and I did see Bureau of Reclamation was on one of the projects, but I think bringing somebody in that needs to manage that resource would be really important, at least at those levels. I mean, maybe it's fractal, and you solve it up here, and you solve it at each of your lower levels, but I think benchmarking or testing all of your work back with a user that you want to get it embedded on the ground with is really important.
Anybody else? Any other comments? Yeah.
I was just
Suzanne?
going to add, following up on this comment about the user, thinking about continuing to engage with the communities, who are affected and impacted by the findings of the work is certainly a direction to go as well.
Could the panel speak about the language barrier in convergence research, like really quickly? What I mean by that is different fields speak different language.
Absolutely. So that reminds me also the metaverse and the scale issue, because the new sort of data landscape we're facing is, from the molecular level, like DNA sequencing data, they are all geospatial, all the way to the discovery of gravitational wave by astronomers. They are, and everything in between. So they are all, in some sense, are handling spatial or geospatial data. It's just at different scales. So, but moving forward, to me, that's probably, there is something could be really exciting happening there across the scale seamlessly. Maybe eventually with the advances in quantum computing, we can create a seamless environment to linking from to the very small to the very large. So that viewing from that perspective, what we are doing, is a from in the geospatial world, this could be a very tiny little part from this geospatial perspective. So in that sense, I do believe moving forward, we needed to do a lot more work to knock down the traditional disciplinary boundaries so that experts in different domains can really talk about, communicate the issue in a very meaningful way. So I think right now still a problem because this has happened 3 weeks ago. I talked to an English professor on my campus. He shared with me, he saw a flyer of a doctoral defense in chemistry. He told me, Dan, I don't know whether it's just me or I'm way behind. I said, what? Because he's a very distinguished Shakespeare scholar. He said, he told me, I thought I'm an educated person, but how comes I cannot understand a single word in this chemistry's PhD defense? So that's the barrier. That's a good example of the barrier that, the different disciplines that don't really understand. And I checked with the chemists in the same thing. They said they don't really understand what their next door colleagues are doing because they are in a totally different field.
So I think maybe there's a prerequisite of some of the things we talked about before of teams that want to work together and are finding something interesting that they want to work on together. But I think you can look at these differences in a negative way, and they certainly present barriers, but I think you could also look at them as opportunities. And I'll give you a very specific example. When we started thinking 15, 14 years ago about how could we as computational scientists and computer scientists address challenges in cities? We were just interested in cities, but we didn't know anything about them. And so we had a series of brainstorming meetings over several years with people that we thought were interesting, that we wanted to work with. And it was actually the first one. There were several people from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago that were architects and designers. There are several of us from Argonne, U Chicago, and a few other universities that are in computer science. And we spent like an entire morning talking about what we mean by the word architecture. And out of that discussion, like one question came out like, and this is of course 14 years ago, maybe it's different now, but how come there aren't diagnostic ports in buildings? Because when you build a computer, part of the architecture is diagnostic ports or test probes. And buildings are getting more, modern these days and so that. But because we approached it as an interesting positive, we ended up thinking about this, and that led us to instrumenting the city of Chicago because the city didn't have any diagnostic, capabilities either. So I think this language barrier, it's certainly a challenge, but I think if you approach it as a opportunity, it can spur some new ideas.
So actually, one more point on that one. So more than the language barrier, what I found interesting is the cultural barrier. Because if you look at all of these companies today, they have global workforce, right? So we have teams working in so many different countries. So when you put those people on projects that are related to, let's say there's a problem in US customer that we're trying to solve. It'll be a very interesting experience to explain what that problem is to somebody in Morocco, for example, because they don't have any cultural context, or they won't even understand what the problem is if you just try to. So it's the same problem, like if I try to explain the problem to some English professor, it's exactly the same thing, because they don't understand English professor talks the same language as me, but they don't understand the geospatial. So in this context, the person in Morocco talks English, but their cultural background is so different that the problem I'm trying to solve here, they have no idea what it is. So those are challenges and opportunities also. If you can explain the problem to them very clearly, then you've done again, you also have to think about different ways how you can make other people understand what the problem is when they don't have the right background.
So I know for all these deep, broad, profound questions, we can spend the rest of the evening here, but we only have an hour to discuss this very exciting topic. So before we close, I want to congratulate Xiaowen and the entire iGuide team for the remarkable accomplishment for the iGuide project in such a short period of time. It's indeed a very exciting new development and bring scholars and students from so many diverse fields. Also, please join me thank our geospatial leaders for the stimulating discussion today. Thank you.